And negotiations are underway for a new hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, with hopes that it will bring potentially a temporary break in the fighting.
The proposal includes the freeing of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel in exchange for the release of hostages and a significant increase in humanitarian aid. However, the details of the framework are still being discussed, with any actual dealing taking time to come to fruition. Let's speak to Yotam Canino, who's the foreign editor at Jewish News UK. Yotam, some tentative hope here, but there's obviously a long way to go.
Yeah, a long way to go. Some hope, obviously, because both Israel and the United States and Qatar all say that there have been some progress in these talks, and the fact that they're even talking is in itself positive. But it seems as if both Israel and Hamas stick to their demands. Israel's demand is to eradicate Hamas and free all hostages. And Hamas's demand is for Israel to withdraw fully from the Gaza Strip. All soldiers should leave Gaza before they will start releasing any sort of hostages. Now, both those demands are not compatible, obviously. So one has to give, one has to compromise. And it looks like Hamas has, well, it has the power, really, because it has hostages in its possession. So at the end of the day, Hamas will be the actor that dictates most of the terms in any sort of ceasefire deal.
And there has previously been quite a lot of concern that we don't actually know where all those hostages are. Is there any more clarity that if a deal was brokered, that those people could be released because we know where they are and how they're doing?
No, that's also a huge concern for Israel, because we do hear several stories from hostages that were released in the last batch, in the last ceasefire, who said that they were held by not only by civilians, but actually also by members of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Now, this just makes the situation all the more chaotic, because that means that Hamas doesn't know where all of these hostages are. And we also have Islamic Jihad, which is an even more radical terror group inside Gaza, which also holds some of these hostages. And they have something to say in all of this as well. So it's not just Hamas calling the shots. And we also have to remember that at least 25 of the hostages, of the 136 hostages, have been declared dead in captivity. And that's just the ones that we know of. There are most likely more hostages who've been killed since they were taken to Gaza.
Yotam, if things do go well and most or all of the hostages are successfully released, what's the end game in this? We know Benjamin Netanyahu said he wants to destroy Hamas. I mean, that seems like an impossible goal. We had David Cameron speaking, as we heard earlier, talking about a two-state solution. How do you see any kind of long-term ceasefire manifesting in the Middle East right now, given where we are at the moment?
Well, first of all, Hamas needs to be removed from power. Whether you destroy them fully or partially, that's a whole different issue. But you need to remove Hamas from Gaza, because until Hamas is no longer a threat to Israelis who live near the Gaza border, there will be no end to this war. Once Hamas is removed from power or significantly destroyed, there can be some sort of peace negotiation. But we have to remember...
What fills the void? Is it the Palestinian Authority, or is it a state run essentially with Israeli protection?
That's the next issue. When everyone is talking about a two-state solution, but there are so many variants of a two-state solution. First of all, who should lead the Palestinian people? The international community wants the Palestinian Authority to run a Palestinian state. The Palestinians do not want the Palestinian Authority to run anything for them, because they're deeply corrupt. In fact, almost 90% would like to see the current president resign. So you don't even have an agreement about who should lead the Palestinian people. And second of all, there's also the whole talk about what would a Palestinian state actually entail, because for the Palestinians, they need East Jerusalem as their capital. They need to allow Palestinian refugees from Lebanon and Syria and Jordan to return to live in a Palestinian state. And of course, they would like to secure their own borders. Now, all of those things are something that Israel won't agree to. So the whole notion of a two-state solution is so outdated, because there are so many versions of it, and
outdated.
They're so far from each other.
When you say outdated, what is if you can't have a two-state solution, what does the future of the Middle East look like?
Very bleak, unfortunately. You would have to have, first of all, two different leaderships on each side. The current leadership with Netanyahu leading Israel with his far-right ministers is a disaster for any sort of peace negotiation because they're simply they're too aggressive and too hardline in their rhetoric when it comes to the Palestinians. And you would need a new leadership on the Palestinian side. You need two leaderships that can at least sit down and compromise on some issues. And currently, that's simply not the situation. We have to look at the facts on the ground, and those are the facts.
It's interesting you use that word compromise, Jotam. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu said, "I will not compromise on full Israeli security control over the entire area in the west of Jordan. This is contrary to a Palestinian state."
Absolutely.
TalkTV interviewed Netanyahu earlier on in this week. He seems resolute, and I guess some of the concern is that Netanyahu benefits to some extent the longer this war goes on.
Absolutely. He's playing politics, and I believe that that's why Lord Cameron is also saying that the UK could recognize a Palestinian state. I think this is pushback for Netanyahu's political games. Everyone knows that he's buying time now. He's doing everything he can to stay in power, whether that means prolonging the war or whatever it means, dismissing the idea of a two-state solution. He's looking for the day after this war and to stay in power. So again, as long as he remains in power with his idea or his dismissal of a Palestinian state, and as long as the Palestinian Authority keeps running things in the West Bank and being so unpopular, there's no solution. You can't solve a crisis if you have two leaderships that are deeply unpopular and that cannot compromise on a single thing.
Yotam, thank you very much indeed. It sounds both depressing and intractable, but we're grateful to you for your time. That's Yotam Confino, I beg your pardon, from Jewish News UK.